Hello and welcome to this chess endgame review on opposition. So what is opposition? Some of you may ask. Well, opposition is a chess technique in which, if we look at this position here, opposition is something where the kings come together opposing each other, and whoever's turn it is not has the opposition. When the kings are directly in front of each other like this is the direct opposition. They each control these three squares in front of their position. And so this blocks one another. The kings block each other, opposing each other, and whoever's turn it is not has the opposition because they can force the other king to retreat or move to the side. And so in this position, if it is white's turn to move, he will have to move to the side, and it will allow black to gain ground. If it is black's turn in this position, he would have to back up or move to the side and allow white to go forward. And so in this position, I'll just show you an example. So if it's white's turn to move here, if he backs up, then black can move directly forward and grab the opposition again, as they are directly on the same file here with one square in between each other. So now it's white's turn to move again. If he chooses instead not to back up but try to move to the side, well then black can move forward by outflanking white, by moving around here and making forward progress. All right, let me show you another example here of opposition. Let's see. Okay, so in this position, we have opposition once again, but this is instead of direct opposition, where there is only one square between the kings, this is distant opposition. And so in this position, we have 6 squares in between the kings on this file here. And so in the distant opposition, whoever's turn it is to move would like to land on the square. So if white moves here, he wants to move forward and land on a square that leaves an odd number in between the two kings on this file here. And if we continue, the reason that is, as the kings move toward each other, the person who moved first, white in this case, and landed on a square leaving an odd number in between the kings, as they move closer together, they end with this odd number, the single square, and we have the direct opposition again. So if we go back here, white jumps forward, leaving one odd number, one square, between the two kings, and black will be forced to move to the side, allowing white to make forward progress or even back up. And so now let me show you another example of opposition. Let's see here. This is diagonal opposition. So once again, instead of a straight line up a file or across a rank, we have the opposition along this diagonal here. And so if it is white's turn to move, he moves forward, leaving once again an odd number of squares in between them, and it is his opponent's move. And if they just move towards each other on that diagonal, we see that white ends up jumping in here, leaving a diagonal with one square in between them, and black will have to move off to the side, and white will make some kind of progress here So this is called the diagonal opposition, the distant diagonal opposition. When they're one square, it's just a diagonal opposition, kind of like the direct opposition with the kings facing each other with one square in between. Okay, so I hope this is not confusing you. I'm trying to go slow here. So now you may ask, well, what do you do if they're not on the same line? They're not on a diagonal, they're not on a rank or a file. Well, here it's a little bit different. So here you want to move forward. If it's white's turn here, he wants to land on a square that produces a square or a rectangle between the kings, and the corners should have the same color at all four corners. And so if he does that, we have this. So now the square between these kings is B2, F2, F8, and B8. But if we look at the four corners, it's the same color here. And so if the other king moves down trying to do the same, well, not the same, but trying to grab this or get closer, he does this again. White will jump here, once again making a square or a rectangle where the four corners are the same color. And so if black moves, then now we have the direct opposition where there's one square in front of each other and black has to move to the side or retreat backwards. And another way that that could have played out, if I go back to the beginning, is so once again, whoever's turn it is to move, if it was black's turn, he would want to move to F7. So it produces a square or a rectangle with light squares. But the important thing is that the four corners, those four squares are all the same color. And you just keep doing that. So if we go here, let's say instead of moving to E7 this time, black tries to play some tricky moves and moves here. Well then, king to C2 would leave the kings on a square or rectangle with all four corners the same color. And then if he moves here, we just keep doing that same procedure. Wherever he goes, we just move where all four corners are the same. And if he comes down, we go up there. And slowly we can make headway and move up to his position. Until here we have the direct diagonal opposition here. And if the king tries to move forward, then we have the direct opposition. So this opposition, I wanted to show you these different types of opposition. And now, of course, this is a draw with just kings on the board. But now we'll add some pawns and see how it can make a difference using the opposition. So number 5, example 5 here. So now we've added a pawn. And in this position it is white's turn to move. So here he should grab the opposition, jumping in front of his pawn and forcing black to move to the side or retreat. And so if he moves to the side, white can outflank him, gaining ground up the board. And if the king tries to step in front of the pawn and stop white from making further progress, white can just grab the opposition again. And then he has to move, and he outflanks him, moving up the board. And now if the king moves down towards the pawn, you can just push the pawn, and that way on the next move it will be protected. And so if he backs up, you just move this pawn. If he tries to get in front of the pawn, you can grab the opposition once more, forcing him to the side. And so whatever side he goes to, you go to the opposite side here. And now you can escort your pawn the rest of the way up. So check, if he moves, and now the pawn will become a queen and you should win easily. So that is a way to use the opposition to help promote a pawn. Let's look at another example here. Okay, so here is an example to show you how to defend and stop the pawn from promoting. So you want to stay in front of the pawn and not let white pass the pawn and get up in front of it to help escort it. So once the king is back behind his pawn, you just step straight back, staying in front of the pawn with one square in between. And then this allows you to move whatever side white moves to. You grab the opposition, jumping in front of the king with the one odd number square in between you, and you have the opposition. But the king doesn't have to move. He can move the pawn. Well, then you just jump in front of the pawn. White will have to move here to protect the pawn. And now the same thing. You just back one square directly back from this pawn. And if the king jumps to this side, you just grab the opposition again. And then if he goes back, just jump in front of the pawn, and you repeat this process. So here, if he tries to trick you, just jump straight back. And if he goes forward, grab the opposition. And you just repeat this process until he brings the pawn all the way up here to the 7th rank. You jump in front of the pawn again, and now if he moves away, you capture the pawn. So the only thing he can do to protect the pawn is move here, and it's a draw by stalemate, as black has no legal moves. All right, let's look at one more example here. Let's see. All right, I tried to cover that up before you saw what the move would be here. So this shouldn't be too difficult. Maybe to some it could be, but what do you think in this position is the best move for white to play here? How does white win this game? All right, you can pause the video if you need to. If not, I will continue here. So let's look at the analysis. All right. So here it shows multiple moves that are good. But one thing that you can notice here is that white has the opposition. The pawns are opposed, or excuse me, the kings are opposing each other with one square in between. And if right now it's white's turn to move, but if he moves this pawn forward on h4, now it is black's turn to move. He can't push this pawn or it will just be captured and promote. So white has the opposition now, and black is forced to make some concession by moving backwards or to the side. And so the computer recommends e6, but we can look at different moves here. So one example is if d7 is played. So if he moves back, this will allow white to just jump into the position. He can go after this pawn immediately. He could move forward and keep the opposition. But one example is to just go after this pawn. And then we have this. If he tries to stay here to guard this pawn, you can just push the pawn forward. And it would maybe result in this. Now here's the interesting move. White has multiple plans. He could just abandon this pawn and then go after these pawns and promote one, or this move, which is interesting. Just put the black king in a stalemate position, which forces this pawn to move forward. So after it moves, you can capture, and then another one is forced to move, and then you can let that one go, and then just checkmate with this queen move. So that's one interesting way the game could play out. Let's see. Another option is, let's see, where did we looked at king moving to the side. Another option is the king trying to stop white's king, and then let's see, moving forward. And if the king, well, first we'll look at this. If the king blocks the pawn, then the pawn could just move, and the pawn can be abandoned. White could go over here and just grab these pawns and promote. If black tried to promote his pawn, the queen, the white queen, would make it there first, and then he could jump down with check, and he could stop this pawn by jumping in front of it. Even if the king protected it, he could jump in front, and then this pawn is ready to promote as well. So that's one possibility. Let me go back here. Another possibility is, let's see, if he tries to run in that direction. Yes, if he tries to run there, you can just push this pawn. He would have to go back to try and stop this probably, but then you could just have that same position with the stalemate. If he moves here, the pawn promotes, but now what does he do? He would have to push this pawn and lose there. So maybe that happens. And then this. And then here you don't even have to, if he goes here, I might as well just do that, and the pawn will promote. So those are some different possibilities that could play out in this. But the move is to play h4 in the beginning to just grab this opposition. And once this black king has to retreat or move to the side, then white can move in there. And, well, before this video gets too long, I guess I'll stop there. So that was a little overview of opposition. I hope it helped you understand it if you weren't familiar with the opposition before. And hopefully you can use that in your end games, especially to try and get an advantage for the win, or to even stop save a draw if you're defending. But the opposition is a very important endgame technique to be aware of and to know how to use. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions. Enjoy some of my other videos at my Nick Butts Chess channel. Well, thank you all. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.